Welcome, everybody. My name is Brad Trimble. I'm the Director of Learning and Strategy for the RP Group. Very excited to have you all joining us today. We are highlighting the RP Group's 2025 Outstanding Project Award, which recognizes colleagues and organizations that have made extraordinary contributions to student and institutional success through community college research, planning, and institutional effectiveness efforts. Today, we are joined by Jesus Rivas of San Diego College of Continuing Education, who's going to be talking about the project that he took on with some colleagues titled Crossing Borders, Bridging Identities, Empowering Binational Students at the U.S.-Mexico Border. Welcome, Jesus.
All right. Thank you very much for having me and for providing the space for our presentation. I'm very happy to see many of you in this room. I will share with you that there's a lot of information related to this project. It wouldn't surprise me if you feel like you're only getting snippets from section A, section B. And because of that, you should feel comfortable in just emailing to me if there's any conversation that you want to continue afterward or any document that you're interested in seeing a little bit more. Absolutely, that's not a problem for us. So with that, I'm going to move us forward. And the presentation, this is a little bit about empowering binational students in the institution. And we're going to talk about a couple things. Before I do that, I want to share that this is a work that has been done in collaboration with multiple individuals in the institution. It's really bridge or taking the collaboration of people that are students, staff, faculty, administrators, including VP, the president, like all of them have been involved in this project in one or other way, which is part of why it makes us so happy to be able to present it to you. We believe it's a great way to showcase how we can have effective collaboration that will benefit to the students and a nice way connecting research and planning and institutional priorities and the student voice all into the one project. So we just want to share that with you. Now, today, we will not be having BP, Dr. Carter, and then our Dean, Jessica Litke, and our researcher, Seme Coronado. There's a major institution-wide event happening right now. They had to attend to it, but I wanted to keep their names, well, first of all, because they put a lot of work into this project, but moreover, I also want to continue showing you how, again, part of the key things that we kept in this project and that we believe are part of our recipe for success is having people from different places collaborating in this project. It's not really the labor or the work of one researcher, it's more of a collaboration happening in different spaces. Now, for those that may not know, San Diego College of Continuing Education, that's the institution that I am from, and that is a non-accredited institution within the San Diego Community College District. And we are in San Diego County, and our service area is San Diego City. Now, we are currently serving more than 24,000 students every year, and we have 7 locations across San Diego City. We actually have a lot of offsite locations in which we also offer non-credit classes. Think of a public library, for example, think of a community center. Those are places in which we may be teaching classes to our students. So we teach non-credit. What does non-credit mean? It could include a lot of different things. A lot of people sometimes they think about like ESL classes or high school classes, but we also have DSPS classes, classes for older adult, and then also CT classes. Automotive, healthcare, welding, all those are classes that we offer in our institution. So you can see how there's a lot of things that we have to offer to the community members. At the end of the day, we just want to have things that our community members can go and get benefited from in different ways. Now, the project in this case, it's binational students, and I'll talk a little bit about binational and what that means in a minute. But I wanted to share that this project was envisioned as a way for us to learn a little bit more about the Cali Baja region. The Cali Baja region, for those that might not be aware of, is the combination of San Diego County, Imperial County, and Baja California. So this is a mega region that involves a lot of different dynamics happening every day. Thousands and thousands of people every year are crossing the border back and forth, whether they're crossing the border to get an education or whether they're having different activities, entertainment activities. For example, there's such a culinary scene happening like in Rosarito, Tijuana, all those places. But then also we have a lot of people from Tijuana that are crossing the border every day for work or for going to the school. A lot of things are happening in this border. This is a very dynamic border. In fact, these places combined, they house 7.2 million inhabitants. So that is huge. You know, if you think about that as a size, that's just like a lot. And we really wanted to look into that in terms of understanding how that can impact the experiences of our students, specifically the binational students, And we believed at the time when we started this particular project that we had a unique opportunity by being based in San Diego, which is again the heart of so many of these dynamics compared to other places in the United States. We thought it could allow us to just get a glimpse into what our binational students are going through with all these things happening. Now, before we move forward, let's see if this one works. Sometimes Mentimeter is a little finicky, but if you can just take a minute and just scan the QR code or go to menti.com and enter the code that I'm showing on screen. I guess I want to see what does it come to mind when you hear the term binational. I have been talking here for a couple minutes right now, and it's binational this, binational that, but people wonder like, what does that even mean? So if we could just pull up our cell phones for a second and just go to this QR code, and there's just going to be the one question asking you, what do you think a binational student mean? And don't worry, this is not a gotcha moment. This is not one of those questions that has a right answer, and I'm just going to start asking who say this, who say that. No, I just want to get a sense of what does it tell people, the term, what does the term tell people? And I'm going to try to do something here. I'm going to try to move us to Menti for a second, so just bear with me while I'll try to pull this. In the meantime, please start taking the Mentimeter. So let's see. All right. Okay, so I believe you're able to see the meter screen. If I could get a thumbs up just to make sure that you're seeing somewhat of a scatter plot. There you go. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Joshua. Yes. So when we talk about binational, it seems that for people, it may sound like a bicultural individual, an immigrant individual, transborder individual, and an other type of individual. So I appreciate you all sharing your thoughts. The reason why we like to include this portion in the presentation is because it allows us to just understand better how do these terms come across to people as we continue to talk about them. Now, with that, I'm going to take us back to the presentation, and I'll talk to you about what do we mean when we say binational. Now, if I could get another thumbs up just to make sure that I'm back on the presentation slide deck. All right, cool. Thank you. Perfect. So what's going to happen? In a minute, I'm going to share with you what we mean with binational. But before I do that, I just want to tell you a little bit about what we're going to be talking today. And we're going to talk about identity and intersectionality. We're going to talk about research practices. We're going to talk about research-supported interventions, targeted action plans, and institutionalization. Now, if you're able to stay until the end of the session, or if you're going to be catching up a recording or anything of that kind, there's a bonus at the end, which is hands-on resources. So all the things that I'm going to be talking about, say the interview script or the survey instrument, all those things, that the qualitative categories, all those things will be made available for you at the end of the session so that you can go and like really look into with more detail. And as I mentioned, if you feel like we didn't spend enough time talking about topic A or topic B, you can absolutely email and we'll be happy to continue this conversation. Now, what was the project objective? When we started working on this, we just wanted to come up with a list of recommendations. We wanted to empower, support to the best of our ability, the binational students. But we wanted to make sure that if we ended up with a list of recommendations, we wanted to make sure that this would take into consideration that things that were already happening. Probably it's happened to you if I have researchers in the room. It happens to you that you go and do a research project and you feel all excited about the recommendations that you're sharing with executive leadership or maybe with the deans and manager in the institutions. And out of the 10 recommendations that you're providing, 9 things are already happening. And it's more of a matter of like, how could those 9 things that are already happening be scaled up in a way that students are aware of them and in a way that everyone has access to those amazing things that, again, you're recommending, but they already exist. And so that was one thing that we wanted to make sure that we had, like somewhat of a idea of those things that were happening at a small scale that we could scale up. Number 2, we wanted to understand the differences between the subgroups, because I'll talk a lot about binational students today, but that doesn't mean that they are all the same. And I'll probably be cautioning you as we move in this presentation about that, in the sense that just because we're talking about a particular demographic, that doesn't erase the individual story that every person has. Just like if I'm talking to all of us as a group of, RP group members, each of us will have a different story. And we just need to find that ability when it comes to leveraging the commonalities across a group while also not erasing the individual stories that each individual has. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then third thing is tailor. We wanted to make sure that our recommendations were tailored to the different stages of the student journey. It's not the same what a student is looking when they're just starting with non-credit college all the way until they're wanting to get a job. So we wanted to make sure that whatever we provided was beneficial for all those stages. And by the way, before everyone starts getting nervous, I'm saying non-credit. There's a lot of commonalities. There's a lot of things that can be transferred over to the credit side. I always joke about that because usually we get a couple of people dropping down from the call when we say non-credit. Oh, boom, I'm out. I'm credit. I'm not interested in this. So I can assure you that there will be multiple things that will be beneficial for you in your practice, especially when it comes to research practices, planning practices, institutional effectiveness, and whatnot. Now, what did we do to come up with this project? We started with a literature review, and that included, I think, at least 30 journal peer-reviewed papers that we went through, just analyzing, understanding better what had been so far research about this particular population. We moved from that into a qualitative research component. We interviewed students, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we had multi-stakeholder facilitated discussions. That was very important for the project, really pretty much bringing back the information to students, staff, and faculty and managers so that we could derive value out of the data that we had collected. And then we closed with a survey that helped us to quantify the things that we had found in the qualitative research stage. Now, some of the things that I wanted to highlight about the literature review is the student definition, some concepts that are relevant, a little bit about intersectionality, and then the research framework. Now, what do we mean? Again, I've been talking for 10 minutes already, and I haven't shared with you what's a binational. I appreciate that you enter your information into the Mentimeter, but for the purpose of this project, we define binational students as those that had significant ties with 2 or more countries or nations. And what that means is that we're thinking about people that maybe they're visiting a lot a different country, or they are from a different country, they lived in a different country, they were born in a different country, they have ascendancy from a culture from within a different country. So you can see how it's actually a lot of things. Now, people immediately go into, oh, does that mean immigrants? No, it's actually immigrants, but also people that are first, second, third, fourth generation immigrants. Children, grandchildren, grandchildren of the immigrants, depending of the, how they are managing this, navigating multiple cultures. All those people are included into this. And the reason why we were very interested in that is because San Diego College of Continuing Education, we have a lot of students that are binational, whether it's because they're immigrants or, again, they have in their cultural background, there's component of other cultures that they bring in a day-to-day to the life that they live. Now, for this project, and going back to the map that I showed you between the United States and Mexico, we believe that for the first time that we were going to do this exercise, we wanted to focus in binational Mexican students. And that was, again, because of the proximity with Mexico that allowed us to explore with more detail into the dynamics happening with binational Mexican students. However, when we came up with this design, we did it in a way that it was really prepared to scale it up in the future and look into binational students in general. And we have already done that. You'll see in the survey that we already asked questions to all the binational students that we had, and the framework holds up. The insights continue to come our way by using this framework that we started using with Mexican students, binational students, and to all of them. But anyhow, who is a binational Mexican student for the purposes of this exercise? Is someone who's got descent from Mexico, who identifies with the Mexican culture, who visits Mexico frequently, who has lived in Mexico, who lives in Mexico right now. Remember, there's a lot of people coming back and forth between San Diego and Tijuana or Baja California. Someone who's raised in Mexico or someone who was born in Mexico. Any of these categories, a person may be just in, a person may only align with one of these categories, or a person may align with all the categories. It depends on their own life and whatnot. Now, that's a binational student, but another concept that was really relevant as we started navigating all the information that we were collecting from this particular project was the cultural adaptation theory. So this is a very interesting framework that speaks a little bit about how people can navigate more than one culture. The people that are, because they were immigrant or they were born and raised in a household with multiple cultures, they often go through a process that we call the cultural adaptation process. Now, there's 2 cultures, at least, in the experience of this person or the upbringing of this person. And the first culture will be called enculturation. The second culture, it's going to be called acculturation. Now, I like to explain this based on myself, and I'm an immigrant person, and I think that makes it easy to share with people. But again, it doesn't mean that only immigrants go through this process. And me as an immigrant, my first culture is the Mexican culture. However, I have been living in the US for, I think, close to 7 years now. So I went through an acculturation process. Now, depending on how things go for me, I may fall into one of 4 categories that I'm showing in here. Depending on whether I keep my first culture or I don't keep it, and whether I take the new culture or I don't take it, I could fall in any of these places. For example, if I am someone who is successfully maintaining my first culture, my traditions, my ways of doing things and thinking and communicating, all what it takes, the Mexican culture, but I'm also adopting the ways in which things are done in the United States, the traditions, the cultures, the messages, and whatnot, then I'm in the corner that is called integration. This is a person that is navigating both worlds and that is able to just, continue to have a circle, say in this case, my case, a circle of Mexican friends and family and whatnot, individuals close to my life, while also adopting or while also starting to connect with people from the US. So in theory, that's where we typically want to bring the, folks. We want to make sure that they continue to feel proud about their first culture, but that they also feel like they can take a new culture without feeling like they're abandoning the first one. However, not all the times it happens like that. And by the way, I'm going to be drinking a lot of water because I'm just struggling with a little cold. But sometimes it doesn't happen like that. Sometimes, and you probably have seen this, there's individuals that, whether this because they immigrated from a different country or maybe they were born in the United States, but they are not able to exercise the first culture, the culture that they had when they were born. And that could often be related to racism. Whenever it happens that someone experiences racism, sometimes they decide to deny their first culture or have their children to deny their first culture so that they don't experience racism down the road. You can see that in people that, again, even though they have immigrated from a different country than the United States, they may have decided not to speak their first language anymore, or they may have decided not to celebrate the things that they used to celebrate, or they may have decided to just change the ways in which they view and do their daily living drastically. Now, there's more than that. There's also the separation. Separation is where people fall whenever they decided to just stay within their first culture. They come into a new country, in this case, the United States, but they decide not to take into the, ways of thinking, ways of doing things within the United States, the American culture. They feel like they are more comfortable just sticking to what they believe are the core values that they should go with on a daily basis. Now, usually when people think about separated, people immediately think of an individual that may not know how to speak the language or may not have any acquaintances from the United States beside their core group of people that come from their culture as well. But no, often people that are in the separation group is actually people that may be able to speak the language, but they just decide to use it for transactional purposes. They may go to work every day and they may know how to speak the language. They may know how to do all the transactions within American culture, but they just decided to keep it at that point. I'm just going to go, I'm going to do my job, and then I come back and then I connect with my people. I'm really not interested in taking any of the values from the American culture. And then the last one is the marginalization. Now, marginalization sounds like a bad thing. Pretty much it means when someone doesn't fit into their first culture nor their second culture. And it usually feels like a bad thing, but actually there's an interesting story behind marginalization, which is the Chicano culture. The Chicano culture was actually a product of marginalization, in which people that had Mexican ascendants, and then also in general, Latino ascendants sometimes too, they started feeling like they didn't belong to either place of the border. They felt like they were not either from Mexico nor from the United States. The people in the United States made them feel like foreigners, like they didn't belong. But then also those connections that they had in their, whether it was their country of origin or their parents' or grandparents' country of origins, also made them feel like they didn't belong to that place either. So that's how it created this very rich culture that is the Chicano culture. So I'm only illustrating that to say that sometimes it's not only integration what you could see as a positive output, there could be other outputs that are happening. Now, people will ask, why is this relevant to the purpose of your research project? This was relevant because we wanted to make sure that for example, the recommendations that we were providing to our counselors and faculty when working with students would take this into consideration, because the aspirations and goals and then interest for a student will change dramatically based on where they are falling into this category. I can tell you, for example, people that are in the separation component may not really be interested in going into one of those events that we have in which we say, hey, let's just, mingle and connect with people from all the different places of the institution. The students will tell you, I'm not interested. I'm just coming here to get a degree, because then I got to go and get a job. And that is as far as I want to get. Students that are integrated will probably be interested in connecting with people across the institution. Students that are assimilated may probably push back on whenever you say that this is Hispanic Heritage Month and we're going to be celebrating, this particular culture, and we want to do these events. They may not be interested. And then marginalization students may not really connect or respond in the same way when you have conversations about what a core value is and whatnot, because they may be thinking of something different to what we're used to. So the better that we understand these things in connecting with the students, the better that we are able to find them or find the best way to support them in their journey. Now, there's a framework that we use for this particular project, and that is starting from the personal vision for success and acknowledging that every student has a different story and every student has a different goal. Now, the combination of goals is what we're going to be calling a vision for success. Perhaps my goal is to finish a degree. And I want to finish a degree because I want to make my parents proud. And I want to make my parents proud because that's just who I am. I want to keep, my family happy, proud of myself and whatnot. All that will encompass what is my vision for success. Now, as a student, I'm going to have my visions for success that is comprised by multiple goals that I have. And in me trying to get to that point and building that vision for success, I'm gonna face different challenges. And the challenges will change depending on my own background, upbringing, and different factors that take, that play into the equation. But for me to move forward, to overcome the challenges, I'm gonna be tapping into my own strengths. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because if you look into the slide, we have the strengths, and then after the strengths, we have the supports. The supports, that's where the institution kicks in, not before. And we are trying to be careful in this, because very often we jump into this $1 million investment plan to do something that we are hoping that is going to help students to just get to where they want to get. And we don't even spend the time into talking with the students and understanding their strengths better. If the supports that we're providing to the students are not aligned to the strengths, are not aligned to the ways in which they do things, it's just not going to work. It's just going to feel like an imposition, and students are not going to go with it. And then your investment is not going to be as effective as it could be. So we were very intentional in creating this framework in a way that we leave these supports until the end. We first need to understand the stories of our students and how they do things before we come up with ideas, because those ideas might not be related to what they want to do or what they can do. Now, one story that I share with people whenever I'm talking about strengths and supports, it's a story of, say, students that sometimes we would have in the CTE programs. And students in the CTE programs would sometimes have, and this is specific to students that were still developing language acquisition. It doesn't apply to all the binational students. I'm going to keep saying that. This is just one story. But students that fall into that category, sometimes, for example, they would be advised by their faculty to go and take additional classes of ESL before they could re-enroll or enroll into CT classes. Now, often some students would take that advice, but other times students would be like, no, I don't have time to do something like that. I'm just wanting to finish my degree because I want to go and be a welder. I want to go and be a chef. I want to go and be whatever was the case. Now, some of our faculty, they identified that there was strengths in the ability of our students, financial students, into making connection with other students that they were bilingual, multilingual. So what the faculty in our institution is starting to do, and again, this is just one example, instead of sending students to the ESL programs, and not all students were able to do that, they didn't have the time. Instead of doing that, they created a type of environment that allowed for ESL students to connect, or ELL students to connect with bilingual, multilingual students that they were their friends, in a way that they would just be sitting down in pairs throughout the class. And if during the class, the ELL students needed a little bit of guidance into some of the vocabulary that was being used, they would just immediately get a quick confirmation from their friend on the side. Now, of course, it's a little bit more complex than that, but pretty much that solved the problem. And a lot of students say, yes, instead of having me spend 6 months or one more year in taking ESL classes, now I'm sitting down with this person on the side, and they're just giving me the clear, specific clarification that I'm hoping to have for this particular word that I'm not aware of. So it's, again, just how using the strength, in this case, the ability to make those connections, as opposed to telling them, okay, go ahead and change your vision, your plan, so that you can accommodate this support that I'm providing to you. Now, some of the things that we found, qualitative research, I want to highlight the fact that logistics are complicated. And I think I'll share with you a little bit of the breakdown of the interviews. I'll talk a little bit about the actual interviews and then how we coded the information. Now, we interviewed 13 people, and for those that have done qualitative work, you'll probably feel like that's a lot. For those that have only done quantitative work, you'll probably like that's not enough. Well, I'll say it's a lot of information. That was more than 1,000 minutes of recordings, and we got more than 100 categories of qualitative information that we were able to use for the quantitative stage and to do better decision making with that. Now, what was the breakdown of the participants? You can see that on the screen. We have a little bit of everything. We had women and men, members of the LGBT community, young students, older students, students living in San Diego and Tijuana, crossing every day, students that had never lived in Mexico, students that did, workers, non-workers, people that were earning living wage. It was a very rich sample. And for those doing qualitative research, you know this, whenever you're doing qualitative, you try to make the sample. Once you select the subgroup that you want to interview, you want to make it as rich as possible so that you can achieve, oh, I'm blanking on the word. Well, I guess you just want to keep it as rich as possible so that you can get better results. Now, there's more we have people that were culturally Mexican, bicultural, people that were born in Mexico, born in the US, prepping for college, ESPS, with the ESPS conditions, people that were head of households. All those things were reflected in the 13 people that we mentioned before. Now, how did the interviews work? These were semi-structured interviews. They were 90-minute long, and they were in both, all four in both English and Spanish. So we would just connect with the students and they would tell us whether they prefer one language or the other. It's important to share with you the interviewer at these interviews. That was myself. I'm a cisgender male, I'm a binational individual, I'm an immigrant, and I'm an ELL person myself. Now, why is this relevant? Because there's a balance that you need to play. When you have a person like me that is able to build rapport with other binational students, because I'm a binational individual myself, that's really good. You can build rapport, you can get people to share things that perhaps they wouldn't normally share. However, there's also a balance, because me, by being another binational individual, I will be bringing my own wealth of experiences. And if I'm not careful enough, I'm going to start projecting my own experiences into what students are sharing. So for that, and when it came to having coders, I was one of the coders, and then we have Dr. Coronado to be the second coder. Now, what does that mean? It just means that I had my codes as I was taking my notes, as I was listening to the recordings and then drawing the different nuggets of information. I would just build my notes. And then the second coder would just go and review what I was saying, what I was putting into writing. And often it would happen that the person in charge of the validation will come back to me and they would say, I don't understand how you came out with this whole code. And I don't understand how you came out with all this experience, because you just wrote one entire page. And when I went to the recording, I only heard like 3 seconds talking about that topic. And I would say, oh no, but when the student talked about that, they gave me an eye, they gave me a look, and I understood that they were talking about that. So that was often the conversation within the validator, and telling me, yes, you may think that the student meant it like that, but if the student didn't share it in the interview, then it's not going to be included in what we are showing here, because it is likely that you just projected yourself into what they were talking about. So it was a lot about that, and being careful, and things that, again, I was pretty sure the student meant it in a certain way. If it didn't come like that in the interview, well, pretty much it just means that I gotta get a. I think often the recommendation would be like, just get better at interviewing people next time if you want to make sure that they share those things with you. Anyhow, now when I say that we got qualitative categories, so this was a result of the qualitative component of the interviews and analyzing the data. We got 133 qualitative categories. Now, what does that mean? Here's an example. Diminished academic ambition. This is something that came up, and a category can come up in one or multiple interviews. It's just something that can hold by itself because students explain it, either one or multiple students explaining it in a way that you can document it. So in this case, for example, you can see that we're talking about diminished academic ambition, and we describe it as experiencing discouragement from the teachers, the counselors, the staff, or the peers about pursuing academic goals. For example, enrolling in college level classes or mastering English as a second language. And there's a quote from one student in talking that they were moving from our college into Mesa College, a Grady College, and some people were telling like, I don't think you're ready. So that's what we call about diminished academic ambition. And just like this one, we built 132 other qualitative categories that eventually we use to identify actions that we could take with the students or to support the students. And I'm just gonna take a second to sip on my water. Now, it is my hope that by now we have all developed a collective understanding of the solidity of this research methodology. It is my hope that by now it's evident for all of us that we are serious about this work and that we believe that it's really important. And now, hoping that you're all at that point in which you see that we see the value of this project and that we are taking it really, really seriously, I just want to share with you some extract from our conversation with students. Now, I'll say that I'm sharing these extracts in the way that they came to my head. I'm a person that loves analogies, and I'm a person that is in love with my own culture. I'm in love with the Mexican culture, and I love sharing that with people, which is not applicable to everyone. Not everyone is in love with sharing pieces of their culture, and we should never demand people to share pieces of the culture. It's not like that. But I am a person that likes doing that, and I'm a person that works with analogy. So what I'll do here, I'm going to share a couple stories that we found or that we collected from students, and then how I interpret them through the lens of my own culture. And this is just a moment to relax. This is just a moment to have a laugh, to share a laugh. Again, this is not a gotcha moment. No one is going to be mad at you if you have a good time. But all of that because I already explained you the seriousness of this particular project, and I already have been telling you that you need to be careful in finding the balance between drawing and identifying commonalities in the students that we serve, but not without or not by erasing who they are as individuals. So with that, I'm just gonna share, for example, this one. I don't know if, I guess, at least to myself, I'm a person that likes a lot salsa. And it is not a secret that a lot of people within my culture and the Mexican culture, we like salsa. Not everyone, again, I'm gonna keep saying that not everyone, you shouldn't go and say, oh, you're a Mexican, therefore you like salsa. No, doesn't work like that. But lots of people do like salsa. And one thing that happens whenever we are, like, for example, eating tacos, is that we're gonna pour a little bit of salsa, and then sometimes salsa is gonna be super, super, super hot. And you're gonna put salsa on a taco, and then you're gonna take a bite of that taco. And the moment that you're gonna take a bite, you're gonna get burned big time. You're gonna start like moving around and dancing and being like it's a super, super hot. You're gonna just be start like rolling, moving all the places, like feeling like, man, this is just so hot. And that will probably take like 1 or 2 minutes of your time. And then after that, you'll probably just kind of like stay still for a second and then look again at your taco, and then you'll just take another bite. And then you'll just repeat with the process. Now, you do that, and then while that's happening and you're doing like, again, the little dance of like, this is too hot, you're gonna be saying, using the expression pica rico, which is like, it burns good. Like it burns, it's hot, but I like it. I'm just gonna continue doing that. Well, that's something that came to mind when talking with a student, because this student was talking about how in the cultural adaptation process, when she had just moved to the United States, she was walking one day, and she was walking one day in the middle of the rain. And as she was walking, an elderly man was also walking on the other side of the street. Now, the student, when she saw this elderly man walking on the street, she got worried. She thought, why is this person walking in the middle of the street? This is an elderly man. He shouldn't be walking when there's rain. So she crossed the street. She went to this person. She said, what's going on? Is everything okay? Do you need help? And then this person, the elderly person, said, like, could you just mind your business? I'm just walking on the rain. It's not your business. I'm doing my thing. So the student was, I guess, was flabbergasted. The student was like, I cannot believe that someone would allow the elderly person to walk in the middle of the rain. I will never do that to my mom or to my grandma. Now, that was the first hit. That was the example of when I told you that you're eating the taco, you take a bite, and it's too hot. She was impressed. She was like, what? This is just not clicking for me. However, she then said that after a little bit more thought, she actually liked that idea. And she started realizing that in the United States, the level of independence by elderly people tend to be higher than those shown in the Mexican culture or in other places beyond the United States. And she liked that. So this is kind of what I said about, you bite it the first time, it's too hot, but then you come back because you liked it. So she decided after that she wanted that for her retirement. She said, you know what? I like that from the culture. Even though it hit me in the wrong way the first time, now I kind of like it. And I want to make sure that I live the life in the United States in a way that I'm going to be able to have these levels of independence when I grow old. Now, how does that connect to them as a student? That's how they got into our institution, into starting a healthcare program, because they wanted to make sure that they would get a 401k that would allow them to pay for a retirement as an independent individual. So that's just one example about what happened. And then another one that I want to share here, this is what we call the Mexican national ID. And the Mexican national ID is something that you use for elections to go and vote. In addition to that, you can do 125 other things. Now, the 125 other things, you can do them even if your ID is expired. Voting cannot be done if it's expired. So what happens is that often people will just let it go expire. They don't go and vote, but they continue to use their ID for a bunch of other things. Now, the government is going to run a lot of campaigns every year to encourage people to go and renew it so that they can vote. And when people are asked the question, why haven't you gone and renew your ID? They will say, oh, it's por pura desidia. It's like procrastinating. Like, I'm just procrastinating. I haven't done it. I'll do it tomorrow. People do that a lot. Not all people, again, but a lot of, but some people do that. However, there's usually a reason behind that. And whether that reason is I don't really have time, or I don't have a car, I cannot get there, or whatever is that case, I am intimidated by the process of renewing the ID. Something like that came up with this student, because in talking with this student, he was sharing that it took them a minute to enroll with us. Even though they were aware of the classes that we had to offer, it took them quite the time to deciding to finally enroll in our classes and start attending them. And in talking with the students, the first thing that the student would tell me was that it was por pura desidia. I didn't do it because of procrastination. I was procrastinating. And the student kept giving that answer, kept giving that answer. Now I built enough rapport with the student so that I could start like peeling things as if it was an onion. Now it got to the point in which once I asked again the question, the student said, you know what? And this is what it's on the screen. The student said, I didn't really do it because at the time I was worried. I had to pick up the phone call or I had to go to the office and I had to start talking with people in English. Now, this student wanted to get into high school classes. And the student's concern was that people were going to judge their accent or a lack of ability to speak English and say, why are you interested in high school diploma classes when you don't even know how to speak English? So can you see how there's quite a distance from what they say first about procrastinating into like an actual thing that was happening? So this is one of those conversations that thanks to having qualitative methods into our research, we were able to get into. And now we're having conversations with the Student Services Division about developing support services to eliminate English anxiety around speaking the English language, which is something that happens with immigrant students. And I could say emphasis on students from Mexico. And there's quite the explanation that I wouldn't have time to get into why specifically Mexico is impacted by that, but we'll have to, save that for a different time. Anyhow, now this one is probably going to be more quick. This is just a student talking a little bit about momentum. What I have on screen is just a little toy that we use in Mexico. This is a toy that you kind of like throw it and then you throw it and it's gonna start spinning. And while this is spinning, you gotta leverage the momentum so that you can do tricks. Now, you call it like, you do it as fast as you can so that you can do as many tricks as you can. Now, this student, for example, in talking about how they enrolled, they mentioned how they went one time to the building and thanks to the help that they got from a staff member, they were able to be enrolled in a class at the time, right there. And for them, that was beneficial because they're not entirely sure if they would have come back if they were not able to get enrolled at that time. So it's all about momentum. And that connects with a lot of different things. If the student's already experiencing anxiety, if the student's already struggling to get there, if the student doesn't have all the means to, go back and forth, momentum is key for us to make sure the students are taken to the place where they want to get. And then the last one that I have to share with you before we get to the next couple of slides. So on the screen, it's something that people in the United States, they call that tacos, but those are not tacos. At least for a Mexican person, those are not tacos. And no one will ever tell me that they will never convince me that these are tacos. Now, one thing that happens, and again, I'm not speaking for all the binationals, I'm not speaking for all the immigrants, I'm not speaking for all the Mexicans. So please do not take all these little insights, these little snippets that I'm just sharing with you so that we can have a good time. Please don't go and get out of this meeting saying that you know everything about you binationals or Mexican binationals. Not like that. But one experience that I had, and I know a lot of my friends had in immigrating to the United States as Mexicans, is that at some point it's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen one day since you move into the US or 6 months or 1 year, but at some point there's going to be one day in which you're going to wake up in the middle of the night and you're going to be craving tacos. You're just going to be wanting them in the way that you used to have them in Mexico. In Mexico, there's taquerias, places where you can get taco shops, every corner. It's super, super simple to go and get, some tacos. Now, the thing is, what's going to happen to you, you wake up in the middle of the night and then you're like, okay, I'm really craving some tacos. I wish I could get some tacos. So I'm just going to go outside and I'm going to start driving and see if I can find something like that. You drive and then of course you're going to find this pretty interesting place that has the name Taco Bell. And you of course are going to wonder or think, okay, I got it. I'm going to go to that place. I'm going to get my cravings filled in or fulfilled and I'm going to be in my happy place. You're going to get into this particular store, you're going to get in, and then you're going to ask the person, hey, the cashier, can I get some tacos? Sure. They'll get you a box or they'll get you a little bag, and then you'll be like, nice, I got my tacos. You're going to open the bag, and then you're going to look at that, and then you're going to find out what's in the image. And then you're going to look back at the cashier, and you're going to be like, what is this? Cashier is going to tell you, those are tacos, your tacos. They'll say, no. Like, no, those are not tacos. I don't know what the hell this is, but those are not tacos. Anyhow, there's going to be probably like a little back and forth, but then you'll just get out of there all disappointed and then you'll have whatever that is. Now, the funny thing is that after you try them, you're going to realize that they might not be tacos, but they're good. They're really good. So eventually you come back to the Taco Bell and then you tell to the person, the cashier, hey, I'm back. Can I just have more of those? And then the cashier will probably be saying like, I knew, I knew you would come back. They all come back. Now, that's the thing. In terms of integrated into the US culture, there's a number of things that originally you'll feel like this is not for me and I don't like it. This is not what I'm used to, but eventually you integrate. And it doesn't mean that you erase what you had before, but you're just acquiring like additional layers of complexity that you will use in navigating daily life. Now, this pertained to a student that was really appreciative that our classes, specifically for them as immigrant students, they would help them to understand how to live life in the United States. So they would talk a little bit about how we and faculty in our institution would not only talk about ESL concepts, ELO concepts, but also how to properly navigate different things in the United States that might be different from how things were done in their culture or in their place of origin. So it's just some things that I want to share. Now, I want to move us forward and talk to you really quick about the multi-stakeholder facilitated activity. This was very important for the project because we got more than 30 people, managers, staff, students, faculty, that participated synchronously and asynchronously in working with the data that we had collected and creating a survey that would help us to quantify what we had found in the qualitative stage. Now, a pretty interesting thing happened that when we started with this idea of the multi-stakeholder facilitated activity, the original idea was just like usual. We wanted to put students in one room and the other people in another room. But thank God we have a very smart counselor, Seila Castillo, who said, no, why do you always want to do that? Why don't you just have everyone in the room? We're all adults. This is adult education. People should be able to speak about these things together. And that's what we did. We have people, again, synchronously and synchronously join us. And we got so many great insights that were created and thanks to the synergy that we created by designing the activity like that. Anyhow, after that, we sent out the survey. We put it together. It was a 28-question survey, very long survey. Don't recommend to do with that. However, we did have incentives and we were able to convert, remember the 133 qualitative categories? We turned that into 66 survey question items, like responses that we could have that were aligned with what students have told us, as opposed to us telling people what we thought they were going to answer. Of course, we have cognitive interviewing, proofing, testing. We sent this to all students enrolled at the time that we sent out the survey, and we got more than 1,800 responses, which was great. Now, some things that I want to share from that is specific to the binational Mexican students in the sample, because again, we sent this to all students and that allowed us to identify non-binational, binational non-Mexican, and binational Mexican. And again, the results hold up for all students, but for now, I'm just showing you for binational Mexican students. When it came to the goals of our students, it's all about finding a job or a certification that will lead them to a job. Now, we found that for many of our students, especially immigrant students, which are not all the binational students again, they often go through this process in which they come to the United States and they're looking for a job, any job. Give me just any job that you have in there for me. From that, they move into a better job. Okay, I feel like I'm getting understanding the work culture. I'm also getting my language acquisition process is going well. Give me a better job, a good salary, living wage salary in San Diego. After that, they move into having a good job. All right, got a good job, I got a good salary, but I now need a 401k. I need a vacation. I need medical insurance. So they move into that. And then from that, lastly, they finally move into the job that they love, that they love, what they want to do. Sometimes it's actually what they used to do in their country of origin. We got a lot of nurses, we got a lot of doctors and lawyers, PhD holders that when they come to the US, they have to go through this cultural adaptation process in a way that they take steps down from their career ladder, and it takes them a minute to go all the way back to where they were before. Some other students, in talking with them, we actually have found out that they reinvent themselves. Sometimes in their country of origins, they are not allowed or they're not provided with the resources so that they can pursue a passion because it's not deemed aligned to where they are. And when they come to the US, they start experiencing the American culture, and then they realize that I want to do this, that I'm my country. I didn't have the support to try it, but now I want to do it. So we got a lot of, different things happening in there. Now, what else? Challenges that we have or we found: financial, San Diego's an expensive city, so this was not a surprise. And then balancing responsibilities. We have non-credit students. Our students are adult students, non-traditional. So this just means that they tend to skew older than the ones that you would probably have at your credit colleges. And with that, they have responsibilities. They have families, they have jobs, they have different things that just kind of make it a little harder for them to stay connected to their classes. Now, we have some examples about some students talking about the high cost of living. Some students also share that you know, as much as they love our institution and as much as they love San Diego, they are never really thinking about, what is it? I'm blanking on the expression, but having roots, man, just staying for the long term in San Diego because it's just too expensive. Some students would share that and say like, no, I'm really taking your classes because they're free, but eventually I'm gonna move to Arizona or to Las Vegas, to Nevada, just because it's just crazy expensive in here. Now, strengths, really important. Again, our students, they have their strengths. We gotta let them tap into that before we talk about any supports. We gotta understand those strengths before we come up with some $1 million idea about something that is not gonna help them, really. Strengths that we found, the one at the top, determination related, and this just means about the, I think it's called the grit, you know, growth, resilience. I'm lacking on the other terms, but it's just like how life sometimes is not gonna go your way. And as much as the institutions are gonna try their best to allocate resources effectively, often students will need to just do that push, that, you know, that final push so that they can get to the place that they want to get. So some students, for example, this student was saying like, courage drives me. It gives me the energy and I get it done. I turn the negative into the positive. That is really important because I don't think we're going to ever get to a point in which there's not going to be any more challenges to the student. We just need to find the recipe so that we can have them tap into this energy whenever that's necessary. How can we train our faculty, our counselors, or staff members so that when they see a student struggling, we know how to bring them into this place of energy and tell them, okay, this is going to get hard. We have this to help you, but let's just tap into this energy so that we can make it happen. And then the support, students mentioned they like the fact that we had multiple variety of classes and then that they were low in cost, you know, or free in our case, or classes are free. But then also they wanted certifications, which connects back to the jobs. And then the students talking a little bit about the benefits, but I'm going to move forward. Now, there's a lot of work that we did, research and planning, you know, papers analyzed and data collected and interviews, lots of different things. But the most important thing, I guess, is like, how can we make sure that this doesn't end up like a pretty report on a shelf that no one ever reads again? So this is where we talk about the institutionalization process. And this is where we connected heavily with the VP of Student Services and continue to keep everyone outside of the research office involved in the process. So we did a couple of things. We took those 133 qualitative categories that I told you about, and we organize into goals, challenges, strengths, and supports, what I told you about before, the framework. And from that, in collaboration with people, not only researchers, we identified 305 actions that we could take that would either help students get to their goal, overcome their challenge, tap into their strength, or use the support that we had in place. So we created that, and that's going to be available for you in the resources at the end of the session. What happens with that? Now, 305, that's a lot. Do we have time, money, resources to do all of that right away? No, there's got to be somewhat of a prioritization. So we wanted to keep it real in the sense that we know all of this is amazing, but people have limited times, people have limited budgets, and there's limited resources just in general. So we identify 18 actions that we would call low effort and high impact. We plug these 305 activities into this matrix that came with level of effort and level of impact. And then we started plopping them, and those 18 that came in that corner, those are the ones that we move forward with in the early stages. It doesn't mean that we're not doing the other things. It's just something that we wanted to prioritize. How do we prioritize? Well, I guess before how we prioritize, this is what I'm talking about. If you're wondering, okay, but how does that look like? Enhancing translation, providing training to staff and faculty on Binational, providing PD opportunities on cultural inclusive teaching. So there's a little bit of everything. And now I want to continue emphasizing, I talked a lot about ELO students, immigrant students. Those are not the only population within Binational Students. It's just something that came up in the process, but there's much more in this particular research project or research and planning project. Now, how did we prioritize those? Okay, you know those 18s are really important, but how do you actually make it happen in a way that people don't forget about this? You put it into their strategic plan, and I think this was gold in the project. Once we have identified what we want to prioritize, then we work with them because we also owned their strategic plans. Not own, we have the system. We manage the system for strategic planning in the institution. So we work with them so that they would reflect this in their plans. For example, this one was an activity developing a personal growth class for binational students. There's an expected outcome, there's a KPI, there's a timeline, there's a responsible, and then it's how it relate to the bigger plan. So by doing that, then you institutionalize it, and it's not just like a research recommendation that no one follow up on. There's more. We also explore, and this one is still in development, but this is another time. Sometimes we have mid-year allocation process in which we have leftover funding. So that leftover funding, now we can connect it to the findings that we have and send emails like the one that I have on screen. It's an email in which, in this case, the VP or the president would share with people, there's 25,000. However, we want to make sure that they speak to this particular action because we identified that it would be beneficial to binational students. So this is good to make sure that the work gets done. And there's more. There was this a student support audit, because what I mentioned before is that there's a lot of actions and things that are already happening. So we need to make sure that in sharing with people recommendations, we're not asking them to do things that they have been doing for the last 3 years. So before we went and started recommending everyone to do everything, we actually have meetings with student services and we show them the actions, and then they started marking the ones that have happened already. And we identified that a lot of these things, perhaps like 70%, they were already happening, but the scale at which it was being done, it was just either small or there was not enough awareness on the student side. It's just talking a little bit about that, which I think, yes, there's this. We created this again as part of the holistic student support audit. We said, okay, you may have programs, ideas, like in this case, the personal growth class that I showed before. You got to understand, are the students even interested in that? Is it happening already? Are students aware of that? Have they used it? And if they used it, are they satisfied? Because the things could be in a different place. You may have a really good idea, a program running, and it's really good, but students are not aware of that. That's one problem. Your problem is in awareness. Whereas on the other side, you could have another program that is running, all students are aware of that, but it's just not good. The quality of the service is not good. So these are different problems. We got to be able to speak to both of them. Now, in closing, just a couple conclusions and recommendations, but I believe the value is more in like all the approach that we found. And you can see this is something that could be applied in credit frameworks as well, not only non-credit. Conclusions and recommendations for our case. We're going to prioritize flexible and free programming. Students said that was important. We're going to design support our own lived realities. We got to make sure that we understand students. Before we come up with anything, how do students see this? We got to build on student strengths. What I said before, let's not go and invest a lot of money into something that is not really aligned to what student is planning on doing. This one is very important. Next one, apply the framework broadly, but with cultural sensitivity. What I said, there's commonalities, yes, but every student is their own person. Everyone should have the right of, their story to be told in a unique way. Not in a way that, oh yeah, you're, Mexican binational individual. Yeah, you're all the same. And Jesus talk about the Mexican ID and then the tacos and yeah, I got you, man. I know what you're struggling with. No, it's not like that. It's much more rich like that. This is just identifying commonalities, but not still allowing people to tell their piece, their story. And then institutionalized student-centered change. Do not wait. This was important for us. Yes, the report was amazing, the charts. We were excited to see the responses coming in, the interviews. That was very good as researchers. But we had to push ourselves a little bit further to make sure that we would institutionalize this and working with people. So that. Now, only have 3 minutes. I'm sharing with you the QR code. You can use it so that you can access the stuff that I have been talking about, the instruments, the many other things that I mentioned today. But again, if anyone has any questions, you can reach out to me. I don't think I included that in there, but if you just have, J Rivas, it's not jrivas@sdccde.edu. That's my email. You can email and I'll be more than happy to connect with you and continue the conversation. So with that, I'm gonna give it back to Brad. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is very exciting work that you all have done. I love the frameworks and how you help make it tangible for folks trying to interpret it and do great work with students. Yeah, if anybody has any questions or you wanted to get in touch with Jesus, please reach out to me. I can connect you to Jesus. So thank you very much for attending today's webinar, and we hope to see everybody soon, and have a great week. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.